There is a moment in life that almost nobody talks about out loud. It doesn't happen in loud ways. No dramatic breakup. No obvious tragedy. No clear reason people can point at. It happens quietly. In classrooms where laughter echoes from the back rows. In group chats that keep going without your name ever appearing. In weekends that feel longer than they should. In birthdays that pass with polite messages instead of real presence. And slowly, without you noticing, you start becoming someone who is always there, but never really with anyone. You tell yourself it's fine at first, that you prefer being alone, that friendships are complicated anyway, that you don't really need people that much. But there is a strange truth no one prepares you for. The human mind adapts to loneliness, but it never stops recognizing it. And so even when you're smiling, even when you're functioning, even when your life looks normal from the outside, something inside quietly starts to change. Not loudly, not suddenly, but deeply. You stop expecting invitations. You stop imagining yourself in group photos. You stop reaching out first because the silence after is always heavier than the courage before. And here is the part that most people misunderstand. This isn't about being friendless. It's about what happens to the mind when connection becomes something you observe instead of something you live. Because when a girl grows up without close friends, it doesn't just shape her social life. It shapes the way she sees herself. And sometimes she doesn't even realize it. Not yet. But if you've ever felt like you're watching life from the outside, even while standing right in the middle of it, this story might feel uncomfortably familiar. And there is something deeper going on underneath it all. Something most people never see. Something we're going to slowly uncover together. But first, there's a moment we need to revisit, because it usually starts much earlier than people think. Not in adulthood, not in college, but in small, almost forgettable moments that never seemed important at the time. Like sitting alone during lunch and pretending you chose it. Like watching two people laugh and wondering what exactly makes them click. Like sending a message and deleting it before it feels too desperate. And over time, your mind learns something very specific. It learns that reaching out is risky, that wanting people is dangerous, that hoping is something you should do quietly, so it hurts less when nothing happens. And slowly, a pattern forms. A quiet one, a protective one, a confusing one. You start becoming independent in a way that doesn't feel like strength anymore. It feels like distance. And that's where the Rayal story begins. Because there is a psychological shift that happens when someone spends long periods without close friendships. And it doesn't make them broken. It makes them observant, overthinking, hyper-aware, emotionally self-contained, but also quietly disconnected from the emotional safety that friendships are supposed to provide. And here's something most people never realize. Friendship is not just company. It is emotional calibration. It teaches your brain what is normal, what is safe, what is mutual, what is enough. Without it, your inner world starts becoming your only reference point. And your inner world can be very convincing, sometimes too convincing. So now let's go deeper. Because there is a specific emotional pattern that starts forming in girls who grow up without close friends. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. They start overanalyzing everything. A delayed reply, a change in tone, a small laugh that wasn't directed at them. Not because they are insecure by nature, but because the mind is trying to compensate for missing social feedback. When you don't have consistent emotional mirrors, people who reflect your worth back to you, you begin scanning for signals everywhere, even where none exist. And slowly, your brain starts building a quiet belief. I am always slightly outside of things. But here's the twist. That belief doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like logic. It feels like truth. And that's what makes it so powerful. Pause for a moment and think about this. How many times have you assumed someone didn't want you around, without them ever actually saying it? Now imagine that pattern repeating for years. That is how emotional distance becomes identity. Not because it's real, but because it feels familiar. And familiarity is the brain's favorite kind of truth. Now, let's shift into something deeper. Because there is another layer here that rarely gets spoken about. Girls who grow up without close friends often develop a strange duality. On the outside, they appear independent, even strong, sometimes even unbothered. But on the inside, there is often a quiet hunger for something they cannot easily name. Not attention, Not popularity, but ease. The ease of belonging without effort. The ease of being chosen without question. The ease of not having to wonder where they stand. And when that ease is missing for long enough, something subtle happens. They stop expressing need. Not because they don't feel it, but because they've learned that need doesn't always get answered. So they adapt. They become self-contained, emotionally efficient, low maintenance. The kind of person who says, "I'm fine," and actually means it, even when something inside is not fine at all. And this is where things get complicated, because the world often rewards this adaptation. People call them strong, independent, drama-free. But internally, something else is happening. A quiet emotional compression. Feelings that don't get shared don't disappear. They accumulate. They turn inward. They become thoughts at night. Overthinking loops. Imagined conversations. Rewritten moments. Not because someone is too sensitive, but because the mind is trying to complete unfinished emotional sentences. Now imagine this pattern continuing for years. School, college, early adulthood. Different faces, same distance. At some point, the mind stops asking, "Why don't I have friends?" and starts asking something more dangerous. What is wrong with me that makes this always happen? And that question changes everything. Because once a person starts internalizing isolation as identity, they stop seeing social situations as neutral. They start seeing them as evaluations. Every interaction becomes a test they might fail. Every group becomes a place they might not fit. Every silence becomes confirmation. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because what looks like social failure from the outside is often something else entirely on the inside. Many people in this pattern are not incapable of connection. They are overaware of it. They notice too much. They feel too deeply. They think too far ahead. So while others are living the moment, they are already predicting outcomes. And prediction kills spontaneity. And without spontaneity, connection feels forced. And forced connection feels unsafe. So the cycle continues. But there is something even more important underneath this. Something subtle. Something almost invisible. And it has nothing to do with being likable. It has to do with emotional safety learning. Because friendships are not just built on shared interests. They are built on repeated experiences of, "I reached out, and it was okay. I was myself, and I wasn't rejected. I stayed, and I was wanted." Without those repeated experiences, the nervous system never fully relaxes into connection. So even when opportunities appear, the body reacts first, before the mind can even decide. A hesitation, a delay, a withdrawal. Not rejection of people, but protection from possible pain. Now pause here, because this is important. If you've ever wondered why someone seems distant but kind, friendly but hard to reach, open but never fully close, this is often the hidden reason. Not arrogance, not disinterest, but emotional self-protection shaped over time. And yet, there is another layer still, one that most people never talk about. Because when someone spends long enough without close friendships, they often become extremely self-reflective. They analyze themselves constantly. They try to fix what they think is wrong. They adjust personality traits. They rehearse conversations. They study social behavior like a subject they must master. But here is the painful irony. The more they analyze themselves, the more unnatural connection starts to feel. Because connection is not built through perfection. It is built through imperfection being accepted. And if you've never experienced that acceptance consistently, you start believing you have to earn it. And that belief is heavy. Now let's look at real-life patterns that quietly emerge. There is the girl who always listens but rarely speaks about herself. People enjoy talking to her, but don't really know her. There is the girl who is kind, helpful, dependable, but never anyone's first call. There is the girl who can talk to anyone, but never stays long enough to be deeply known. And there is the girl who prefers solitude so much that she forgets what reaching out even feels like. Different expressions, same emotional root. A system built around minimizing risk of rejection. But here is the subtle twist that changes everything. Most of these patterns are reversible, not through forcing extroversion, not through becoming someone else, but through one quiet shift in perception. Because the nervous system learns through repetition, not theory. And now we reach a turning point in this story. Because the real realization is not, you need more friends. It is something deeper. It is this. You were never actually disconnected from people. You were disconnected from safe repetition of connection. And that changes the entire narrative. Because it means the issue was never your personality. It was your history of emotional feedback. And that can change. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But gradually. Through small moments that don't feel important at first. A message sent without overthinking. A conversation not analyzed afterward. A presence not questioned while it is happening. And slowly, something begins to shift. Not in how others see you, but in how you interpret being seen. And finally, we arrive at the end of this journey. Not as a solution, but as a quiet understanding. If you have ever felt like the girl with no friends, or the person who is always slightly on the outside, there is a truth that sits underneath all of it. You were never missing something fundamental. You were missing repetition of safety and connection. And once you understand that, you stop turning isolation into identity. You stop interpreting distance as destiny. And you start seeing something more honest. That connection is not something you are excluded from. It is something you participate in, one uncertain moment at a time. And yes, it can feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable, because the mind prefers what it already knows, even if what it knows is loneliness. But change rarely feels like confidence at the beginning. It feels like hesitation. It feels like risk. It feels like sending the message anyway, and then waiting, and realizing nothing bad happened. And that small moment, repeated enough times, becomes something else entirely. A new reference point, a new emotional baseline, a new way of being with people. Not perfect, not effortless, but real. And slowly, the idea that you are someone who has no friends stops feeling like a definition, and starts feeling like just a chapter. Not the whole story. Never the whole story. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that like button, share it with your friends, leave a comment down below, and subscribe for more awesome content.